this interview, the first one in English. I'm very happy today to have a special guest from the US. John, thank you very much for accepting this invitation. Could
Thank
you
you.
please tell us who you are and anything in
Sure,
particular you have to share about yourself?
sure. I'd be happy to. And thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be your first English-speaking interviewee. So I hope I'm uh, clear and concise in my answers. My name is John Elliot Simpkins. To be my full name is John Elliot Simpkins Jr. I'm named after my late father. I'm 58. I'm married to my college sweetheart and have three children living in New York. And I have been in HR for over 30 years in executive HR. And I want to mention specifically executive HR because you do get a different view about the HR role from that perspective. So I just think it's just for an important context that I wanted to share. Three children, Brianna, Gabrielle, and Pierce, who keep me busy. They're older, so I have young adults now, but born and raised within the very area that I currently live, and have very rich history in the community in which I reside.
I'm happy that you underlined the fact that HR could have different meanings. And if I can spoil a bit why you inspire me,
Mhm.
I think you're the one who represent the most the H of HR, the human
Mm.
side of HR, and this is something great, and that's why it was really important for me to invite you to this conversation.
Well, I'm humbled by that. I'm very humbled by that because I think businesses often hire leaders and great leaders, hopefully, that are inspired to build great businesses. But behind those great businesses are people. And so the relationship between the people in your organization and the organization itself, someone has to cultivate that. And not alone, but certainly has to provide a framework and a structure around that. And that's where I always tell folks on the HR team, we have to be 51% on the side of the employee and 49% on the side of the company. And when they say, why isn't it 50-50? I said, because the business.
Lost you. We've been cut, sorry, John. So you were
Sure.
telling us because the business.
Yes, the business is focused on building the business. They understand the purpose of people, but someone has to, and a body of people have to be responsible for managing the most valuable resource, which is human capital. And so I'm very happy to do it. It's an awesome responsibility. We have the company I'm with has 800 employees, and I consider it 800 families because it's not just the employees that I'm trying to provide a good experience for, but they have families. And because they're very much a part of this organization too, because their loved one works here, I'm responsible for 800 families, not 800 people.
Oh, what a responsibility! So it's tough.
Yes, it is tough. It is tough. People are one of the toughest and people management for even HR professionals is one of the toughest parts of the job because everyone is different and you cannot manage everyone the same, nor you can put guidelines in place, but everyone has got to be managed uh, uh, very differently because everyone brings a different challenge to the role and a different opportunity.
And this is what is rich in managing. For me, it was
Yes.
the best thing in managing is understand everyone and have a way to talk to everyone, which can be
Mhm.
very different from one to
Yes.
another. But this is what makes you feel more useful also to your team. And
I think you've raised a very good point, which is you recognize the differences in people. I've often had to coach managers who say, I treat everyone the same. And I would joke with them and say, then you are failing. And they said, I said, um, at one point, if you're fortunate enough, or you decide to, and you have kids, you will find out you can raise your kids in the same house, you can send them all to the same schools, but you cannot treat your kids the same. Yes, and some, you want to give them food, and you want to give them shelter, and you certainly want to give them care. But ultimately, when you are dealing with them one on one, they bring something very different to the conversation, and you have to. I don't like to use the word manage when I'm dealing with children, but you have to oversee it and structure it in a way that works best for them,
Yeah.
because everyone's different.
Yeah. And this is what is interesting in human being. Would be boring
Yes.
if we would be all the same, and but
Yes. I never know. One of the unique things about human resources is, on any given day, you are never walking into the same company each day. It is different every day, because you don't know what has happened in the last few hours in someone's life that requires your intervention and your help. So I don't know today whether someone's going to get unfortunately hurt in one of our plants, and how do we deal with that? Someone's benefit, there was an issue and their benefit was not paid because there was a question about a claim that they submitted. Someone has a payroll question, or someone wants to hire someone, and they need help putting together a job description. On any given day, the role changes. And I think that's what I love about HR.
so talking about HR, could you
Mhm.
describe briefly your career, your life, anything you want to
Sure,
share with us for us to understand from where you come
sure,
from and where you are
sure.
now?
Yes. It's a rather unique human resource experience. I will only say that when I started working very, very early. My parents did not have great means. They provided me and my late sister a very good life, but my parents worked very hard. My father was in construction. My mother worked for a company that provided magazines and periodicals, almost like an Amazon before Amazon existed. And so we were very aware that while we were fortunate and blessed, my parents had to work very hard in order for us to have even the most modest of means. So I started working when I was very early, and a lot of those jobs were industrious. So I was working as a janitor's apprentice, cleaning schools. I worked at a church where I cleaned up on weekends after they had service. I worked I worked in a retail store lifting TVs and things into customers' cars. I did construction work with my dad where I was digging ditches. Um, and I would like to say that type of work that I was doing very early in my life helped center me on the importance of people, because oftentimes the jobs that I did, most people ignore those jobs. They know that the work gets done, but they don't really know who's doing it. Behind the scenes, they come into a classroom and the classroom's clean, or the bathroom is clean, or the TV just gets put in their car, or the hole in the ground gets dug. But a lot of folks, and it's not because they don't have a kind heart, but it's not front of mind. They don't realize how those things get done. So I learned very early on the value of hard work. And I was ambitious. And when I graduated from college, I wanted to go into sales. Sales was going to afford me an opportunity to make a good sum of money and potentially start a family. So I went into sales, and most especially, I went into technology sales. That's where, even though I did other sales jobs, but technology sales is where I really started to develop my interpersonal skills and everything. So that's a unique background for someone in HR, because they don't generally come out of the sales arena. Um, but interestingly enough, in the late '90s, when I went to go to an internet company, which was those were very profitable, high-paying jobs in the late '90s. I'd always remained very close with my former company where I had spent years before I left. And the chairman there a gentleman by the name of Stan Bergman, and the CAO there, a gentleman by the name of Jerry Benjamin. They had discussed with me about potentially coming back to this organization. The name of the company was Henry Schein, large healthcare distributor company. And when they talked to me about a role, they wanted me to take a role assisting the HR function. And initially, I thought it was funny. Being a salesperson, HR was not, I wasn't even sure necessarily what HR did. I had some idea because my wife was in HR, but I didn't really think that there was a way to pivot sales into an HR role. But through some rather unique experiences, I learned that human resources is also a bit of selling too. And I mean that to explain that you have a company, they have a brand, they have a culture, and it's a unique culture. How do you promote that to those that don't know about your organization? It often starts during the interview process, and the interview process usually starts with human resources.
Yeah.
So I was able to leverage my sales skills and hire and recruit talent, go out to schools and universities and also to large job fairs and talk about the organization and promote the organization. So I was technically selling, and then hopefully from there hire and retain top talent. And that's what I did. And I never thought that I would find HR as rewarding as I did. But when you find folks, for me, the epiphany was when you're dealing with someone who's dealing with a very serious crisis in their life, and it's impacting their ability to do their work. I won't get into the details because it's somewhat sensitive, but there was a gentleman whose family was killed in another country during a civil war in that particular country. We had a number of immigrants that worked in our company, most especially in our distribution centers, and I was tasked with helping get him the resources he needed to get his remaining family out of the country so that they could be safe, help bury with the resources of the company, not my resources, the company, help his family get buried and take care of his affairs there so that he could extract whatever he could, property and money, out of the country because he was now here in the United States. And, when you're doing the work, the emotion gets set aside. You just want to get them, you want to make sure they're okay. But when it all settled and you really got to think about their experience and the things that we take for granted as people, it was humbling. And I remember this gentleman, I can see his face even as I tell this story, just to have the gratitude and the thanks that he had for the company, and that I was acting as a vessel or an agent on behalf of the company to give him what he needed. And my thoughts about HR changed in that instant. It no longer was a job; it was a calling, because you were helping people who otherwise wouldn't know how to get the help they needed. And so dealing with people in a crisis, helping people through challenging situations, it became a very important part of my job. It's how I like to manage and lead, because we've all been in those situations. I'd want someone on the other side of the desk if I were or you were. And I haven't looked back. So I've been in executive HR for 30 years. It's interesting because I didn't start at an entry-level HR position. I actually started at an executive level HR position because I was hired back from a sales organization to do that. And they brought me in at a certain level, which means I may have missed some of that entry-level experience. And perhaps I did, but overall, I was able to develop a rapport with people because I was dealing with folks at every level of the organization, and I wouldn't trade that experience for anything.
Thank you for sharing this story. For me, it's typically where a job become a mission in life, and
Yes.
And this is something I can recognize in people. When you have this kind of mission, there's something special coming from you. So that's not a big surprise for me to hear this from you, but yeah, I love
Yes.
this kind of thing.
Yes, I think, and it's not for you or me to define great leaders any more than it's for you or I to decide whether we're great partners or great mothers or fathers or great brothers or sisters. That's for other people to define. But we recognize the qualities that we would like in great leaders, and one of them is empathy, and the other is access, providing access to people so that you are accessible, and also delivering on your promises. Because at the end of the day, people come to you with a problem or a situation, and they're looking for your help to help them resolve it.
Yeah, yeah. That's great. So you've been taking care of human resources for years now.
Yes.
Did you notice any significant changes in the workforce those days?
Yes, quite a bit. In fact, I think what's interesting is because I've probably spanned three generations. If you look at the 30 years, three generations of talent, I would say when I initially joined HR, I noticed that the talent pool was very driven by compensation. It was less about experience. That's not to say they didn't want a good experience. They wanted a safe and good experience working, but they were driven by how much money can I make, across the board. It was the me generation, and then slowly we moved into a generation that cared a lot about social responsibility, and they wanted to know that the company they worked for truly cared about the environment and cared about the people that were within their communities, the underserved community. And it was nice to see that pivot. It went from how much money can I make to how can I make a better world for the people around me, and certainly those that won't necessarily have those opportunities. And now I've seen, and it's been somewhat unique, and I think COVID just accelerated it, but it was happening before COVID, is this generation of talent wants balance more than any generation I've ever seen. They do not live to work. They work to live. And so they want flexibility. They want an experience at their company where they can feel fulfilled and part of a team. They want flexibility so that they can enjoy their families and their friends, so that their life does not revolve around the work they do. They want to be able to check out at the end of the day and not be tethered to the office through their cell phone or tablet. They want balance, and it was happening. It was happening already, but then when COVID hit, and everyone's perspective on life changed in an instant, because everyone knew someone who was affected by this terrible pandemic. It's probably changed forever now, and that flexibility, the way in which we work is never going to be the same. You see it because I'm having a conversation with you from home in my office, and where I spend now 60% of my time. One would argue, how do you do human resources and you're not connecting with people? Well, the truth is you have to work at it because it's important, and so that's what we do.
Yeah, this is true that this changed a lot, and this is something we can see also, and it's not only in the US, it's I think everywhere in the world. We can see this in Europe also now. When you look at some job description, there's always a mention you can work from home. This is negotiable.
Absolutely, absolutely,
It was not the case
absolutely.
before.
Yes. It is somewhat unique. I was, in fact, just yesterday, I was talking to a manager in regulatory who wanted the role to be based near our office. And I said, but we only go into the office one day a week. So what benefit will you get from that person coming in one day a week? Do you think you are doing yourself a disservice because you can open it up to someone anywhere in the United States, and someone who could likely have a great amount of talent, but you'll be dealing with them remotely? And she said, I never really thought of that. She goes, but I guess I have to. She says, because the way in which we work is changed forever. I go, oh, absolutely. We will not be, I don't think we will be returning back to the way it was, because I think now companies have been able to benefit from this flexibility, one, and two, the talent pool demands it. So it is the employees that are telling us very clearly, this is the work arrangement they want. And we can either subscribe to that or we can fight it, but we will likely lose if we try to convince the talent to come into the office every day. They just don't want to do it.
Yeah. In a way, it's a waste of time also, because you have to travel to the office, and this is time you could use either for your personal life or to work earlier and finish earlier. So yeah,
No
it
question.
makes sense. Yeah.
Absolutely agree.
And according to you, how does it impact the leader's ability to stay connected to their teams? Because this can be the main challenge. How do you create the link between people when you are working all remotely?
It is a challenge. And I think some of our leaders, particularly some of our I call baby boomers leaders, are challenged with it. And I'm a baby boomer, so I'm speaking for myself too, are challenged with it as well, because the human connection is something that it's always been part of our work persona. The technology tools are great. We're talking, we're each in different countries. We are half a world away from each other, and we're talking to each other as if you're sitting right in front of me. One of the things that I have encouraged leaders to do is to have frequent touch points initially with the folks on your team, but don't make it about work. Have at least one touch point a week if you can, for 15 minutes, and just call it a checkup. And it can be anything from, yes, I was traveling a bit the last few days with me and my wife. We were out looking for furniture, whatever it was you were doing. And so what's going on with you? How's your family? How's your new puppy? And stop right there. And the reason I say stop right there is because when they start, and when we start to understand that it's not always about work, then we're creating a human connection that bonds. And it has to be authentic. Initially, it may be almost an interview. So tell me, I never really understood how you found your way to this area, and why did you choose to live here? What was it? Did you grow up in this community? And just because you may have a legitimate question, and that will spur energy, interconnectivity. It will happen organically if you allow it. And I find that more managers are doing that, and they're making a lot of checkpoints where it's not related to work. And people are embracing it. At first, it's awkward, particularly if your boss doesn't typically do that. But over time, it becomes very normal. But it is hard, and you have to work at it. And so even in human resources, where we talk to people all day, we make it a point to pick someone out of the blue on any given day. I have a call with someone who is in Buffalo today, a finance person, and I'm just calling to say hi. I haven't spoken to them since the interview and just want to see how they're doing. Yeah. You have to do it.
Yeah, it's true that with using this kind of tool, working remotely, I think we all have the temptation to go straight to the point. And we've lost this kind of momentum, the coffee break momentum, or this kind of thing. And this is probably the tougher thing to give back to the organization, I think. Yeah.
Yes. Right. And it's interesting. Just look at the way our conversation started today. The audience doesn't know that you and I spent 3 to 5 minutes just talking about how are you, and you asking me how I am and how's things. It wasn't work related. It was, how are you doing? And what's interesting is people eventually they don't mind talking about themselves, and it also allows people to relax. It puts people in a good frame of mind. They're talking about things that make them happy. It becomes a pleasant dialogue. I learned that from a manager many, many years ago, who would always start conversations with his sales team when they came in to go through their sales run with, so tell me what's going on. What's your plans for the weekend? And at first you were like, why do you care? But initially you realize it's because he was smart enough to know that if I get people calm, if I get people in a good frame of mind, they're likely going to be very open with me. They're going to be relaxed, and I want them to be relaxed around me. And hopefully we create a very respectful relationship. And so I've learned over the years to see great leaders at work and understand how they did it and just find a way to replicate it.
Yeah, that's great. Apart from this weekly checkpoint, if you had to give one advice to a rookie manager, what would it be?
That's a very thoughtful question. What would I say to a young John? And I think it would apply anywhere. Be adaptable, not flexible. You can be both, but you have to at least be adaptable. And what do I mean by that? Flexibility means your ability to bend and then return back to your original state. You know, you take a rubber band and it's flexible, and then but when you let go of the rubber band, it goes back to its original state. But oftentimes the original state has changed. And the reason I ask managers to be adaptable is because when you adapt to certain circumstances or consequences or situations, it means that you along the process have changed with it, and you've become part of that change. You didn't just force the change, or you've become part of it because you now recognize there's things that you may need to do differently as well. And I'll give you just one example. I had a manager come to my office somewhat frustrated and said, I asked this new manager who, you know, I just joined the company and this manager's been here for many years. And I asked this manager to put together some KPIs on their business and get them back to me at the end of the week so that we can discuss them and agree upon what those KPIs should be. And those are key performance indicators for anybody that was wondering what KPI stands for. And it's kind of your guideline of what behaviors you want within your functional area. And he came back to me frustrated, and he says, I've asked her a number of times, when do you think I will get those KPIs? And she said, well, I'm still thinking about them. I'm working on it. So I took the time to listen to what this manager, one of my peers, was saying to me. And then I said, I don't normally do this, but I'm going to circumvent him and I'm going to go speak to this manager and under why there's a reluctance in doing these KPIs. And the manager said to me, I had to go to the internet to understand what KPIs are. And I've never done a KPI before. And I said, now this is a very capable manager. The manager's doing a very good job. So it's not as though this is a report card, but she didn't know. She's never been asked to do it before. And so I went back to to my peer and I said, can I give you a suggestion? And I said, yes. I said, it's about being adaptive. I said, how well can we judge a fish by how well it climbs a tree? I said, it may be a great fish, but it's not going to be able to climb a tree no matter how great that fish is because it's never had to before. I said, that's kind of what you've done by asking the manager about KPIs. So you have to be a bit of a coach too. And that's what it means to be adaptive. Because if we take the time to understand what we're asking for and what their knowledge set is about what we're asking for, we can have a far more collaborative and aligned discussion around those types of things. But we can't just assume. I can't assume the skill set of my team. They can't assume some of my skill sets. Just ask me. And if it's something that I've done before, I'll share those insights. But it was a lesson learned for him. It was a lesson learned for her. And it was also a lesson learned for me because every manager I hired after that, I said, be careful when you join this organization to understand the knowledge set of the people you are working with, because they're very good people and they're very talented. But what you may be asking because you came from a different organization may have never been done here. And so help be both a player and a coach and coach them. And it's worked out. It's worked out well. So I would tell a new manager, a rookie manager, learn to be adaptive.
That's great. And it's a good advice. This is exactly the kind of experience you may have if you move to China, for instance. I was talking about this morning. There's a difference in the culture, and this could be exactly the same moving from a company to another. There's a difference in the culture, and you need to understand how to communicate well with people there, because
Yes.
your references are not the same than theirs, and there could be
Yes.
some things you don't understand, not because no one want to do what you ask, but just because they don't understand what you need, really. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a very fair point. I can tell you, when I've had executives who have been, um, for the first time, had a European business that they were responsible for, I've had managers say to me, you know, they take vacation a lot. I said, what do you mean they take vacation a lot? And they said, well, here we get 2 or 3 weeks, but they get vacation. I said, and that's a bad thing? And when you put it back at them, they pause and they go, well, no. I said, well, don't you think that they've earned a vacation, and that if it allows them to recharge while they're out and they come back? I said, maybe we're looking at them and maybe we're just a little envious. I said, because the truth is, why isn't that a good thing?
Yeah.
And why aren't we embracing it? Maybe we're doing it wrong here. And the fact that we're not giving people more flexibility or more time off is a bad thing. Let's not look at what they're doing as wrong. Let's look at what they're doing as right, and figuring a way, how can we find somewhere in the middle? And it's always unique when I hear that from leaders, because they do have to learn to adapt when dealing with different cultures, particularly if they're going to manage businesses from around the globe. It's going to be a very different experience in the APAC region than it is in Europe, than it is in South America, than it is in North America. They're just different.
Yeah. I think one key quality to handle this kind of differences is to stay humble. Just
Yes,
and
couldn't agree
don't
more.
don't assume that you know something. You don't know anything. You don't nothing. You know nothing about the other culture. And if you come with this kind of with your kids' eyes, just looking for
Yes.
something new and asking question. And this is what I did personally when I worked for a Chinese company, and
Mhm.
I get quickly the trust from my colleagues, because yes, I was humble and I was respectful of what they did. I just wanted to understand, and it was so true that they understand that, okay,
Mhm.
let's explain the differences. And it was, I think we all um, become taller from that, become richer from this experience, just
Mhm.
because we we were sharing things very transparently, and that's
Oh,
great.
I couldn't agree more. None of us is better than another person.
Yeah.
I don't care what your title is. I don't care what your compensation is. I don't care who your family is. You are no better than the person next to you. Until they show you differently, they are deserving of the same level of respect, until they show you otherwise. And that's just the
Mm,
way you should manage.
yeah. I think it's a good transition to the next topic.
Mhm.
We hear a lot about D&I, diversity and inclusion, those days,
Mhm.
especially in large companies. What does that mean for you?
Well, for the obvious reason, as an African American in uh, a corporate role, I can tell you that I don't see a lot of folks in roles that I'm in that look like me. And so we know that we still have work to do. But it's more than ethnicity, sexuality, gender. It's much broader than that. When you look at diversity on its surface, by bringing people from different walks of life, cultures, sexual orientation, gender, you bring a thought that you wouldn't otherwise have, because they're coming with a different perspective simply because of who they are. And as more companies embrace that, there is a direct connection between a company's, and because profit still drives the business at the end of the day, there is a direct correlation between a company's profitability and the level of diversity they have within their executive ranks, not just executive ranks, but the company overall. But I specifically say the executive ranks because they are often the decision makers for the business. And so while we would like diversity at every level of the organization, I am increasingly more focused on diversity at the executive ranks because the key decision makers in the organization should look like me. They should look like you. They should think like me. They should think like you, not just as in and of themselves. They should be part of a blended corporate culture. But their voices, your voice, my voice, needs to be at that table. And that's why I think more and more companies are focusing on diversity and inclusion. And in fact, in the United States, most especially, they've added another part of that, and it's actually DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I had someone give me an exercise once, which is if you have someone who is 4 feet tall and someone who is 5 feet tall and someone who is 6 feet tall, and they're trying to see over an 8-foot fence, and you give them all a 2-foot box, okay, that is equal, but that's not equity because the person that's 4 feet needs a 4-foot box.
Yeah.
And so and the person that is 6 feet, they need a 2-foot box. And so it's really about equity as well. And it is going to drive businesses because what we found is organizations that did not take diversity, equity, and inclusion seriously. And there's many examples from some of the retail brands, whether it was Montclair or Prada or some companies like AT&T, where they did not have necessarily the right diversity voices in the room. They went out with ad campaigns that, in many cases, were insulting to whole swaths of people because there was nobody in the room to say that's inappropriate or that doesn't make sense because there was nobody there to provide that perspective. So businesses see the value in it from a profitability standpoint, but they also are starting to see now more than ever that culturally businesses today need diversity because it's going to their customer base is changing.
That's great, and it makes me think of something. If you have to choose between two roads, always choose the one who looks new or looks tougher, because this is where you will learn more. And for me, it's exactly the same. It's easy to work with people thinking exactly like you. It's easy to communicate. You don't need to say a lot of things. You understand quickly. But if you are taking the wrong way, then there will be no one to tell you this is not the right way. We should go there. And diversity,
Correct.
for me, it's this. You will work with many people very different from you. So the daily life could be much tougher because communication could be a challenge, because you may have to explain things much better and much longer than with someone exactly like you. But at the end of the day, the choice you will do will be much more relevant. This is my feeling.
Absolutely. It's no one says it's going to be easy. If it were easy, everyone would do it. You're absolutely right. We have to work at it. We as leaders, whether we are people of color or it's a woman leader with a male team, it requires work on all of our part in order to make this to make this happen. And so, but we can't abandon doing it simply because it's hard, because the business deserves it. The people around us deserve it. I remember walking into the organization. I was there 2 days, and I had people coming into my office from all walks of life saying, I was so happy to see that you were a person of color. They were so prideful about it that it was an awesome responsibility. And it made me pause and say, wow, I don't think you realize just what it means for them to see a woman sitting in an office, or what it means to see an African American sitting in an office and making decisions. It empowers them in a way that we could never imagine. And so we have to continue. And I trust that this generation Z, And the millennials and the generation X and Y who thrive on diversity because it's all they've ever known. They're entering the workforce and they are leading companies, and they don't even think about it. It is just expected. It's automatic for them. So it is going to change whether we want it to or not, because the leaders are changing.
Yeah, that's great. And talking about what you said, starting with the top of the organization, to show diversity at the top, I think it's very important. It's all about exemplarity also. And as you said, it's just, I think it's a better message you have to give to your people than starting with the basis of the organization, because this is easy. But
Yes.
giving power and responsibilities to diverse people at the top of the company, this is a clear message, and this is much stronger.
Yes. When I joined the organization, I was the first person of color in a senior leadership position. We are now 25% of our leadership team is diverse in 4 years. And that's remarkable in and of itself. Certainly, we have the benefits of being a smaller organization, and not having a wide senior leadership team. But that is because we made a concerted effort not to just go out and hire diversity, but just to make sure that they had a seat at the table and that we had a diverse pool to pick from. It's okay if we choose a candidate that just so happens to not be diverse. I tell leaders, choose the most talented person you can find. But my job as an HR leader is to make sure that you have a pool of talent to pick from, that you could be very comfortable hiring any of the people I put in front of you, regardless of their diversity. And so it has worked out extremely well. But our work isn't done, because we still don't have enough women in our ranks, and that has to change. We've added quite a few, but we have to continue the work, because the minute we get comfortable, it stops happening.
Yeah, and there's still a lot of work, I agree, and there's also something to work on the mindset. I'm talking about women especially. I'm part of several network of entrepreneurs, and I don't know why it's just make it happen like this, but it's the two groups I'm part of are only women entrepreneur groups, and they explained to me, yes, we created this network only for women because we experienced that it was a bit difficult for us to talk in a group with men, and so we feel more comfortable talking only with women. So okay, I can imagine this. This is not something I experienced myself in my career, but in a way, it's sad to listen to this, because it should not exist. But that's still the reality of our world.
Yes, as long as those, my late sister once, she was responsible for a lot of charitable programs for the organization. We both worked together at the same organization. She was there for 35 years. I was there for 25 before I left. And she was responsible for leading a team doing social responsibility programs. She was part of a larger team, but she had one particular core area of social responsibility she was tasked with. And at one point, someone came to her and they said, "Wow, you get more and more kids every year." And she paused and she said, "Yes, but these are underserved kids." And they go, "Yes, so I think it's remarkable the work you do." She goes, "I look forward to the day that I'm out of business." She says, because that means everyone is got an equal shot, and they don't need the gratitude and generosity of a stranger. And it's no different with your women group or with a group of African American executives. I've been part of those groups as well, because that would mean that we've become such a blended society at all levels of all levels, government, judicial, corporate, that we don't need these groups anymore. And so I look forward to the day we don't need to have these groups, but we are a long way away from there.
Yeah, agree. But as you mentioned, the new generation will change this, and I'm confident that they will have a great impact on the
I agree.
on the world. Yeah.
I see it with just my 3 kids. The discussions that they have, just very insightful they do see the world very differently than I did at their age. And it's really nice to see.
Yeah.
And nice to feel.
Yes, sure. Maybe more concretely, do you have any advice to HR responsible or anyone in an organization who want to ensure that the concept behind DEI, so diversity, equity, and inclusion, will be turned out into action, really concrete things, not just a concept, because it's the easiest part.
Yes. It's again, a very thoughtful question and a very sensitive one. It's really up to managers to demand it. It's not something they can just take for granted and assume it will happen. And by the way, it is not someone's job to do, it's our job. That's why you find that a lot of diversity offices have been dissolved, because too often leaders said, go see the diversity office, they'll help you with that. It's like, that's not what we do. Every manager has to make a commitment, whether they are a type A personality and they need to know what the numbers are, but every one of them has to make a commitment that they look within their organization and recognize whether it is diverse or not. When they're looking at the diversity on their team, they have to ask themselves hard questions. Is it enough? If it's not enough, then they need to be working with their HR partner and saying, I want to make sure that 50% of the pool that you bring to me for a job are female. I need to make sure that the pool that you bring to me are 50% diverse. I said, however that mix is, I don't care. But I want to make sure that the pool of talent that I have to pick from is 50% this, 50%, or whatever the number is they decide. Because once they do that, then it is a job of HR to work with their recruiting partners, to work with the affinity groups and the like, to make sure that in order for them to put a slate of candidates in front of that executive, it must be diverse. It's going to happen simply because the numbers are there to support it. If you put talented people in front of them, then we have a different discussion. If we give them a diverse pool and we still find that they're not diversifying their team, then we have to sit with the manager and say, do you believe you have an inherent bias that you're not aware of, but no one's ever really drilled down and pointed out to you that you have an inherent bias? Maybe you find it easier to manage men. Maybe you find it easier that you don't have to deal with the complexities of a woman because she may or may not want to start a family or may not be able to put in the long hours in the job. Whatever your inherent bias is, it could be wrong, but we all have one.
Yeah.
And so we have to give them the tools first. If they are not leveraging the tools, then it is a deeper discussion about, this is not about the pool anymore. This is about you.
Yeah.
And what can we do to help you understand the value of DEI? But it has to start at the top. I truly believe it is a top-down initiative. It is not a bottom-up. And so if your CEO and your senior leadership isn't committed to diversifying your organization, I don't care how persuasive your HR leader is, it will not happen. It has to be a top-down initiative that they are committed to, and they're willing to put the time in to make sure it happens. And fortunately, I've been in environments where that's the case. Not all of them, but many of them. And it is happening. I do have that where I'm at now, where there was a desire to make sure that the leadership team was diverse, and we are cascading that down throughout the organization now.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Thank you for sharing all of this. I think it's very valuable for managers maybe who will listen to us, or any entrepreneur. It's something to keep in mind. And if you want to build something strong, then it's the only way, I think.
Yes. Everybody wants muscle, but nobody wants to go to the gym.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? So the reality is you have to put in the work. It's work for me. It's work for you as the manager, but it's the work is worth it, because your organization will only, there's never been any science that has said diversifying an organization has hurt its profitability. It's always been the opposite. So the evidence is there. So just do it.
Yeah. Thank you very much, John. I guess people who listen to us up to now, they understand why you inspire me. It's clear. Now I have a last question for you. So from your side, who is inspiring you?
Well, it's not a single person. I'll be brief in this because it's somewhat emotional. I think initially I know I stand on my father's shoulders. You know, my mother and father, they overcame a lot. They came up through civil rights. They taught me the value of who I am and my worth. And my father gave me great guidance along the way, not through a learned skill, but by me being given an opportunity to experience life beside him, and just seeing how he conducted himself as a man of principle and a man of honor. And they still talk about him to this day because he did. So he gave me the foundation, both he and my mother. My sister, in many ways, because of her generosity and her heart. My wife, because of her kindness and humility. And my kids, because of their fierce tenacity to always want to do what's right. It often challenges me. I don't often agree with their ideas or their principles, but they've always opened up my perspective, and I have to recognize I created those human beings. So there's a part of me running through them. So even when it's coming back to me in a way that I don't necessarily embrace, I have to recognize that I'm a part of their being, and who they are today is what was shaped right here in this household. So those are my key inspirations. And it started right here at my core. It started with my family, and it stays with my family, because in the end, I want to make sure when I leave this house every day, I am making them proud, as their father, as their husband, as their brother, or as their son. And I can do that because they do the same. And so it is a collaborative relationship in every way, and it just works for me. And so it is my family to different degrees, but all with different attributes.
Thank you very much, John, for sharing something very personal. I see
Yes.
There's some emotion behind also.
Yes.
I would say as a conclusion, maybe I think when there's love somewhere, things are going much easier. And maybe what we need is to put love in the job, in the companies, and just being open to love everyone, just as another human being.
I couldn't have said it better, and therefore I won't, because I think you said it best. If you put love in everything you do, including the people you work with, only love can come out of that. Love will always trump hate.
That's a great word. Thank you. I think we have to close the discussion there, because there's nothing better we could say.
And I would agree, and I want to thank you for this opportunity. It was personal, and I hope your listeners and your audience see some value in what we discussed, because I think we have a mutual respect for one another, and I hope that came across in the words that we shared. But I've always found you to be an extraordinary person who happened to be an extraordinary leader. But your personhood is what I will remember most, because that is who I know. I got to know the leader, but the person that I know from when I first met you is the person that I'm inspired by.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you for
You're
your
very
time.
welcome.
I wish you nice day, nice weekend, spend time with your family,
Yes.
and much love.
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you again. And thank you for inviting me. I'm humbled.
Thank you very much. See you soon. We will meet again.
Take care. Okay. Yes,
Bye.
I hope so. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.